name is Mose Calper. I'm an attorney in Los Angeles, and I'm here with two good friends, Brian Breuter as well as Joseph Limbaugh, who teach something called Improv for Trial. And we are here in this beautiful yurt in Santa Monica, California, one of my favorite places on earth. I happen to live only a few miles from here. And I think Brian actually is also, you're not a Los Angeles native, are you?
No, I'm from Miami Beach, Florida. Yeah, I'm from Miami Beach.
Miami Beach, Florida. Joseph, where are you from?
I'm from Portland, Oregon, originally, but I moved to Atlanta. I lived there for 4 years, founded a theater. Now I'm here.
I think that founded a theater is going to become important to this conversation in a moment. Here's what I know about Improv for Trial. I swear to you, I've read everything James Baldwin ever wrote.
Okay.
And James Baldwin loved to write about jazz. And so as I say to my own team, let's improvise like old jazz men and women when we're in a situation where maybe there's not a solution that is very evident to us. I said to you guys earlier, improv to me feels like it's the way to tell stories these days, isn't it? Because it's about authenticity and it's about credibility, and that's what juries want. So give us the high level or the Reader's Digest version. Improv for Trial, Brian Breuter. What the hell is it?
Well, first of all, I should start off by saying I'm a trial lawyer that has been improvising for almost 40 years. And I learned very early in my legal career that we're telling stories. I mean, basically, that's it, to an audience of people that hopefully at the very end are paying a very large sum for the show that they've been shown. And you really have to connect with them. It's really just telling a story in a way that is, like you said, in the moment, authentic, being yourself, and connecting. But what I found was, as I learned more and more about improv, that it's a language, and it's a technique that once you master it, and it takes, I'm still learning about it every day, you can really speak to people in a more meaningful way and tell stories in a very impactful way. Joseph and I have been doing shows together since about 2000.
Yeah, like 20 years.
Yeah, literally thousands of shows.
Yeah.
And it was about 15 years ago that we started to realize that there is a way for us to help the legal community by teaching lawyers this art form. And we've been having a great time doing it. I'll let Joseph speak on the improv. I speak on the law. And then we, like combining peanut butter and chocolate, we make a delicious candy together called Improv for Trial.
I was going to say an old married couple.
Sure.
Yeah,
made
sure.
of chocolate and peanut butter. Yeah, they're both true. Now, and for me, improv is about communicating with people and connecting with them and really listening. Like, there's a connection between the performer and the audience that you don't have in a regular show, because the audience will influence your performance and change it. But there's also a connection with the other people on stage with you, like your partner. You make your partner look good, right? And these skills, they're helpful to anyone who needs to communicate, which is anyone who's a human being, which is all of us. But it's especially valuable for lawyers because so much of what you do is a performance. You're communicating. You might have the best logical argument you can, in the world, but if the jury doesn't hear it, if they don't understand it, then you failed. So communication is key as far as I'm concerned.
We were talking before that camera was turned on, and I was saying, and I'm thinking about my last jury trial actually in Riverside with a very good mutual friend of ours, Howard Bornberg. And, the jury was, they were tired. They didn't want to be there. This is a true story. We did 5 days of voir dire. No one believed us that the judge let us do 5 days of voir dire. We probably went through 4 panels, okay? And yet those people were still bored and didn't want to be there, right? I said to you right before we got on camera, I don't think jurors want to be entertained. They want to be moved. They want to be compelled, but they don't want to be entertained. And you said, bullshit. They totally want to be entertained.
Absolutely.
So, one, let's talk about how you entertain them and why they want to be entertained. But I really want you to also think about this question. I think that's changed. And I think it's changed because of social media. And I think it's changed because of our attention span and how we take in information.
Well, the way we as lawyers have been telling stories in the last 3 years is very different than in the last 5 years, totally different than in the last 10 years, and completely different than the last 20 years. So things have changed. You know, people have gone from whiteboards where you're drawing stuff in front of the jury to Zoom testimony now. Now you don't even have witnesses in the courtroom. You don't have a human being in the courtroom. And there are even cases that have been fully by Zoom, where you've had the jurors having a remote experience. So in order to capture their attention and their imagination, you have to tell stories differently. And that's part of what Joseph and I have been doing and creating innovative storytelling techniques by using these improv rules.
Yeah, I mean, improv is all about adapting to the situation you have. You can come in with a plan. So improv is about adapting. And since the landscape is changing, improv helps a lot with that. You know? Just being able to pivot in the moment, acknowledging when something is funny, you know, during a trial. I mean, how often do you do that? Right? But it's important because people need a moment to like breathe. They need a moment to acknowledge stuff, to move forward. Yeah, so it's being in the moment, really.
And you know, trials and lawyers telling stories of tragedies most of the time, it's scary. And jurors can come into the courtroom very intimidated and uncomfortable, having to make decisions about other people's lives or about large sums of money moving from one side of the table to the other. And, you know, it all depends. You have to read the room. That's a lot of improv, is reading the room and doing things when they're appropriate. But there is room for levity, even in the most serious cases. I just did a wrongful death case in Florida just a couple of weeks ago, and the jurors were so scared coming in because you think, oh, Florida, there's COVID. There's no COVID. Yes, there is. There was, because those jurors came in there and I asked them. I spent an hour and a half just talking about COVID. And some jurors were like, nah, it's no problem for me. Others were like, I'm terrified. This is the longest I've been in a room with other people for 2 years.
Yeah.
And the judge was like, take off your mask when you're talking to the lawyers. And you could see the fear in their eyes. And so, you know, I had to tell them how scared I was to not have my mask on in a room with other people. It's the longest I'd been at that time without a mask on in the room. But making them feel comfortable and then getting some laughs really kind of relieved the pressure in the room. And then we started talking about a wrongful death case. So, you know, you have to be able to take the temperature of your audience and really be observational about who they are and how they're responding to the information you're giving them. And improv really teaches you.
Yeah, I mean, we're not saying you should yuck it up, you know, while you're doing your job. But, like, laughter is a release. It's like a pressure relief valve. And it humanizes us. And if you
releases dopamine.
It releases dopamine.
It does.
Absolutely.
For real.
It's good for you. And when you're dealing with things that are very heavy, you need that every so often. Just take a break from it, you know, to be able to pay attention. And you're dealing with complicated information, you know, often medical information that you're trying to get them to understand. And so, yeah, it's just keeping them in the moment as well. Like, not just you being in the moment, but allowing all the jurors to be in the moment. Yeah.
I like what Joseph just said about don't yuck it up. Because, look, I think there are people who are funny. And I think there are people who aren't so funny. and I think what I keep hearing, and one of the themes as I understand more improv for trial, and have probably been using it, and just not sort of calling it that for a lot of my career as well, is authenticity. You got to be credible.
Right.
So if you're trying to be funny, people are going to know you're not funny.
You can't teach 7 foot. Either you're 7 feet tall or you're not. And you can't teach funny either. There is, truth in comedy. I mean, the reality of the situation oftentimes is funny. Mistakes can be funny, and embracing those
Right.
moments where things don't go as planned can be funny. But again, improv, in the traditional sense, you think, Groundlings or Comedy Theater or Second City. Yeah, sure, there's a lot of funny improv, but improv for trial is using these theater skills in a way to tell a story that's compelling, that is dramatic, and that is also funny at the right moments. It's that balance. It's that dance that we teach.
Yeah, I mean, my training comes from a gentleman named Keith Johnstone and his book called Improv. But he's been doing this for a really long time, and his kind of holy grail of improvisation is how do you tell a story? How do you keep an audience engaged? Not just that they're going to laugh a ton. Laughter is a byproduct, but they're not going to be engaged unless they see a story on stage, unless they see something that compels them. They see a transformation. They see something that has a little more depth to it, and that is tricky to get to. And that's what we teach. We teach performers and lawyers to do.
We teach something to lawyers in improv about being altered, letting the information that you're receiving change you, and also observing when others are being changed. That's part of the improv language and being connected with your scene partner. And you know who your scene partner is in a huge portion of the case? The jury. You're connected with them. Remember, this is something I tell all trial lawyers. There are 2 shows going on in a courtroom. Okay? There is the story, there are 2 stories, if you will. The story of your client, what they've gone through, what they're going to go through. The changes in their life, how they've overcome things, or the challenges they have ahead of them. That's the story. The other story happens 3 months earlier when they get their jury summons in the mail. And they're like, oh, shit, jury duty. I don't want to do this. Or, yay, jury duty. Or, this is interesting. Or, I'm going to get paid to not go to work. I'll be on a jury for 2 weeks. That's your audience, potentially. And you have to know who your audience is and make them be a part of the other show, which is the show in the courtroom. The judge, the defense attorney, the defendant, your client, your associate, the clerk, the bailiff that's, telling people where to sit. Those are all players in this other bigger story. And, the jury is writing the ending to that story. And it's going to be based on their observations and your relationship with them. Because if you don't have that relationship established with them in a genuine way, you will lose.
Yeah.
Or you'll have a really bad ending, or an ending that you weren't hoping for in that story.
I love the word story, and I'm not just saying that. And before, again, we turned on the camera, we were talking about a famous book that some people behind the camera know about, Robert McKee's story. I remember as a young lawyer, and most people who know me and know my personality do not believe me when I say this, I struggled with nerves as a young lawyer because I thought I had to memorize something that I was going to present to a jury, or something that I was going to present, by the way. Thank you, Keith.
This story just got more
This story just actually got much better because in this class is something I love dearly. But no, where I was going with this is I think the nerves, and I've asked a number of brilliant trial lawyers this, including some folks you know. Olivier Talia once said to me, I said, don't you get nervous before a trial? And how do you manage the nerves? And he said, Mose, of course, if I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't feel some nerves, because often there's someone's life that is going to be profoundly affected by the performance that I give, and so I feel that pressure. But he said, You know, if you're telling the right story, if you're telling a good story, and this is what I didn't understand as a young lawyer, it's not about a PowerPoint presentation. It's not about memorizing the facts of the case and making sure you've got your dates right and all this. It's about moving people. And when you tell a good story, it reminds me of that Mark Twain quote, right? It's really hard to. Joseph smiled, so you probably know it, and I'm going to get it half right. But basically, it's really easy to tell the truth because you don't have to make up any facts, right? And so talk to me about, because I think there's a lot of young lawyers out there, and this is great. This is an opportunity for you to address those young lawyers who have never done a trial, who are going into their first trial, and they're scared as shit, and they got a tiny bit of vomit on their tie, and they're going, oh my God, I've got this PowerPoint presentation, and I've spent 50 hours on it, but I'm worried that I'm going to forget these dates or the facts of shit. I'm worried I'm going to forget my client's name. Help them understand that story means you can let go of those nerves. You can let go of the anxiety because you're just there to tell a story.
I'll let Joseph start with fear and speaking.
Yeah, I mean, fear is a big problem. Obviously, it's the number one fear that people have is speaking in front of an audience, right? Which is insane to me because it's not dangerous. Like it's much more dangerous to get into a car and drive around at upwards of 60 miles an hour. But we're not terrified when we get into a car. But hardwired into human DNA is this fear of speaking, and it is a big problem. Keith talks about it a lot. His whole thing is, if I could just get rid of fear, then everything else would be fine. Fear is what leads us to have a trouble performing. But if you, just like you said, if you get connected to the story, you look at your client, they've been through something horrible. You're there to help them. You're not alone. You're there to support them, but they also, the importance of their case is there to support you. There's a value to story that kind of elevates you above fear, right?
I love that phrase. Elevates you above.
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to get rid of the fear. The reason I love improv so much, and the reason it helps with fear is because it's on its face a risky endeavor. You're performing without a script. The audience knows it's a risk. The audience knows it could be a complete failure. But that's the value of it, that there's a risk involved. And so, embracing that and, allowing yourself to kind of have the fear, but continue on, I think is very important. But yeah, telling the story, rising you up.
Well, part of improv and what I have learned and enjoyed the most is when, surprises happen.
Yeah.
And things that are unexpected come, and those are gifts for you. And people are afraid of the unknown and the unexpected, things that they didn't plan for. I thrive on those things because I know, because of doing improv for 35, 40 years, I'm gonna take whatever information comes and make it look like I planned it. Because I'm gonna embrace it. I'm gonna take that information and I'm gonna build on it. While my opponent, on the other hand, who's flipping through his pages and looking for the document
right.
or whatever it is like, where did that information come from? It's just learning, and by doing these improv exercises, learning these games, understanding the concepts, understanding something called status, which Joseph and I love to teach, the fear goes away. For some people it doesn't go away. I'm fearless when I go into those situations. Of course, I want the outcome to be the best for my client, but knowing that you don't have control of everything that's going to happen is liberating.
And accepting that, letting it be part of what you're doing.
Right.
The reason that we have fear is because the jury is like an audience, and when you're standing in front of an audience, it's a bunch of human beings staring at you. In the animal kingdom, other animals staring at you means they're going to eat you.
Yeah, it's
right?
Evolutionary biology.
It is.
It really is.
It is. And so there's this feeling of this relationship where the audience is very scary. But if you can connect with whoever you're talking to, the witness or a particular juror, if you're doing, the selection, then the people staring at you, that disappears. And that's kind of focusing on the person, that you're in the scene with, the person that you're working with, making them look good. Making them have a good time talking to you. I think ultimately you want every interaction that you have with someone to be a positive experience. That's your goal.
I'll just give you an example. So I actually spend more time with my experts and stuff like that, just connecting with them and getting to know them, rather than going over their testimony. Like, don't you want to talk about the testimony? I'm like, nah, you're smarter than me. You know all the stuff already. What I want is that just read my mind. Just go with me. I want you to imagine like we have this wire that is connecting the two of us that is invisible to the jury, but that will be feeding. Just trust me where I'm going to go, or wherever you take me, I'm there with you, making you look good. And if I can make you look great, you're going to make me look amazing too, and that story will come out. Of course, the truth is why we're there. We're there to tell the truth to the jury, and if the jury is then already, you have credibility with them, which you have to establish early, then they're going to go along with you and go on that journey with you, hopefully to the end.
There's a wonderful poem by Anton Chekhov that talks about the thread that sort of weaves throughout humanity and holds us together. And I love the notion. It takes place around a fire in a part of Eastern Europe, which just reminds me of what's going on in Ukraine right now.
I can picture the samovar.
Yeah,
as we're sitting.
But I love the analogy of with.
Would you like sugar?
Azúcar, I forgot. No, it just reminds me of. I like how you said it. When I'm with an expert, I want to have that mind meld, that thread, the thing that connects us all. Which becomes more important than what am I going to say on the stand?
So we're talking about witness credibility,
right?
And first of all, that's everything, is being credible. And I think, I know because I do improv games with my clients. I will do improv exercises with my clients, getting them ready for testimony.
Why? Why do you do that?
That's a good question. Why? Because I tell them I do not want it to seem rehearsed. I'd rather us just get to know each other and improv, because I already know what happened to them, and they know what happened to them. It's just the ability for them to open up and tell the story, not to me, but with me and the jury.
You're creating like a little mini ensemble with just you and them, right?
It's not just me and the witness. It's me, the witness, and the jury. The jury has to be, first of all, ready to meet that witness before I bring that witness in. For instance, my client. Sometimes I want them to meet my client at the beginning. If I feel the jury in that particular kind of story is ready to meet my client early. Sometimes I'll wait for them to meet the client at the very end. And it really will depend, again, on the audience that I have. And a lot of times I will, tell, for instance, like a witness that comes in, listen, you have a nurse on the jury, you have a doctor on the jury, you definitely want to talk, that one right over there, number 8, is probably going to be our 4-person, and giving them information so they know who they're talking about, so that they know how to talk to those people. Mm-hmm. You have 12 different personalities on a jury. You can't just talk to them one way. You have to be able to talk to each jury, each juror, and communicate with them individually. I think that at least that's the way I approach it.
So you coach your witnesses to do that. Is that what you're saying, or?
I don't know if I call it coaching. I just inform them
that these are the people on the jury. This is who to expect. So they're more comfortable, basically, in front of the audience. Like, they're not the audience. The jury isn't just a bunch of faceless, people they don't know. They have a connection with them.
Absolutely, it's making that connection,
and that makes them more credible.
I think so. I mean, how would you feel as a juror? I mean, you're a non-lawyer.
Well, I mean, I think, once again, like if you're talking in front of people, if you're speaking in front of a jury, and you have that pressure of knowing that the consequences of this can affect your life or someone else's life in a great deal, then yeah, I mean, that can make it very difficult to speak at all, even coachingly if you're putting that much pressure on yourself. So I think it's helpful if you have someone there, ideally, I'm assuming you or the attorney, who's, asking you questions, who will make you feel comfortable and will be there with you, not just in, the sense of being there, but making eye contact, being empathic with you, giving you a lifeline so that you can convey the information you need to convey.
You know what? It's important. People say, oh, you guys are teaching acting. No, we're not really teaching acting because, when you go to see a play, right? It's a script. The play is usually going to be the same every week. I mean, because the director has practiced and rehearsed and has a specific way that they want to tell this particular story.
Right.
With a jury and the story that they're hearing, there's an outcome that relies on the 12 people. And if you present a trial to 12 different audiences, you're going to get probably 12 different results. But you can beat the odds if you learn how to connect to that particular jury.
Yeah, there's something I wanted to say about acting because I've worked with a lot. I'm an actor, and I've worked with a lot of even big name actors. Most of them are terrified of improvisation. They don't want to do it. And I've also worked with actors. If I'm going to work with someone, I would prefer that they also have improv training, because someone might be an amazing actor and very believable and very compelling and effective, but as someone who's in a scene with them, if someone is also an improviser, I feel like they see me. I feel like there's a connection, that isn't always there with even a very well-known and excellent actor, right? It's that little bit of knowing that you are in the scene with someone else and they're not just doing the scene.
Well, and that's what witness credibility is about. If the witness is just up there telling this story that they've thought about or planned, or a witness who is an expert and they're going to just go in there and say what they're going to say, they don't have that credibility. They don't have that, audience that's ready for that information.
It's like there's a problem with over-rehearsing something. You don't want someone who's rehearsed. You want someone to tell the truth, really. I mean, that's what credibility is about, right?
Yeah, and I think the jury can see that. And, if a witness is afraid or if a witness doesn't give the perfect delivery, I think that gives credibility.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about something, we aren't perfect. There are mistakes that we make, and being in the moment is, dealing with those emotions as they come up.
That's interesting that you say that. I will save questions for my clients, or for a witness that they're never expecting me to ask.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like difficult questions, I'll ask them. And it could be dangerous because I don't know what their answer will be, but I want them to appear like they're really thinking about the answer and that it's like we talked about it, altering them in that moment. And if I trust them and they trust me, the answer will be genuine.
Yeah.
And it's going to be part of that overall story that I'm trying to tell.
They're definitely in the moment if they're answering a question they didn't expect. That's one way to be certain that someone is in the moment, right, and not planning ahead. Yeah, that's really cool.
Because of my training in improv and what we've learned together and experimented with, we could tell stories so many different ways. We could tell it front to back to front, start in the middle, and use different storytelling techniques. And it really will depend on the audience that we have. Some jurors, one set of jury panel, I'll tell a completely different story to than if I have another jury in front of me. And it really takes a lot of training and understanding on how to identify those people and know the audience that you're telling the story to and how to adjust for it.
And I just want to say things that I love about improvisation and teaching it is that it's fun. It's fun to learn. I mean, there is a value to it, but it is still fun to teach. And that's why, it's like, I don't know, I always enjoy teaching it. The class always has a good time. I don't know, it's just one of the great things about it. Like, there's nothing dry about improvisation. There's a playfulness. You have to learn it that way. You can't learn it through lectures. You have to learn it through participation and making mistakes and having a fun time.
Well, it's also a muscle that you have to continually exercise. So, trial lawyers have been sitting, watching the courtroom doors and waiting for them to open because they've been closed for so long. They've just started opening again. Trials have begun again, but people haven't done a trial or talked in front of a live audience in 2 years or more. And the thing that, I've tried to think 7 or 8 trials already since July of 2021 until now. And thank goodness I've been part of this improv class because that's been honing my skills and getting me ready to go back in front of a live audience and communicating with them because it is hard. I remember just doing a trial with a mask on when I first started and hyperventilating because I didn't realize how difficult it was going to be to talk with a mask on for an hour. But now the masks are gone, and we're going back to the old ways. But I think things have changed, and we have to be able to adapt on these new ways of telling stories. Courtrooms are configured differently now. We have plexiglass between us, and we really have to be able to adapt to these new theaters that we're in.
Yeah, I mean that's the value of improv is adaptation and dealing with things that are unexpected. That happens in every trial, right? That's why it's an ideal training for lawyers because you don't know everything that's going to happen.
What have you since starting Improv for Trial together? What have you observed about most people or trial lawyers that are first getting involved with improv? What is your first observation about these trial lawyers that are new to what we're teaching?
Well, I think with all of the lawyers that we've taught over the years it's a lot of training to become a lawyer. You've taken these classes, you've learned these skills, and lawyers are mostly very intelligent and very logical people because that's what that's what you've been trained to do. You've been trained to form a syllogism and to make a logical, rational argument. And that doesn't necessarily mean that when you're giving that rational argument that you are speaking well, that you're making eye contact, that you're connecting with people, that you're watching the people that you're talking to see if what you said has any impact on them. The pace that you're speaking should be based on the people that you're talking to, the audience. There's a conversation that happens with an audience, even if they're not saying anything, right? If they're just watching you, there's still a conversation. Someone who's giving a monologue is still having a conversation with an audience. Ideally, right? You're connecting with them.
Here's something that I was thinking about. There's a lot of value to listening to other lawyers and hearing their approaches and listening to their war stories. And, we always hear, I can't wait to hear about this one lawyer talk about his trial and what he did or what she did in this trial. You're never going to try that case. You understand? You're never going to have those facts. You're never going to have that judge. You're never going to be in that courtroom. You're going to be trying your case. And so you have to be prepared that when it's your turn to go in there, that you are ready, and forget all those war stories that people are telling you. Just know that if you have these improv skills available to you, you'll be ready to tell any one of your client stories. And again, first of all, you have to believe in your case when you're doing it. But more importantly is, it's just adjusting. I think that's the most important word that I could tell a trial lawyer who is learning improv and honing their own skills and learning this language. It's about adjusting to the information that you're receiving and the information that you're giving. How is that impacting you and the audience that you're telling the information?
Yeah, it's being adaptable, right? It's being adaptable. You know, if something happens and you don't expect it, you change. You know, if something has an impact, you see it as an impact, you delve into it a little deeper. It's a give and take. It's a conversation. And allowing yourself, that's, you know, we start off teaching people yes and accepting things, allowing yourself to be altered, right? It's not a bad thing to be altered. It's human, and we want you to be a human being. The jury wants you to be a human being, right? They want, you know, obviously they want the facts of the case, but they don't want the facts as given to them by a robot, right? And you know, we want to connect with people. It is a human truth amongst all of us that we long for connection. And if we're in that space, we're in this structured environment where it's a trial happening, and there's all these rules, we still long for that. Maybe even more so because we're kind of trapped there. The jury's trapped there until the case is over.
I just had a crazy idea.
Yeah.
And I think this is something we should experiment in with our advanced teaching. We all know, like, the end of the trial, at least if you're on the plaintiff side, is you win X dollars, right? That's the goal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the end of the story. Getting from, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about blank, to the verdict is you win. And deconstructing the story and challenging the lawyers to be, as part of their exercise, part of their training, to tell the story in different orders.
Mm-hmm.
And forcing them to tell the same story from different in a different time frame, if you know what I'm saying. Because this is what I encounter in a trial. We're going to be presenting our case in how many days, and then there's 2 days off, or this witness doesn't show up, or this witness is only going to be on video, and things that we never anticipated. And forcing the attorneys to be ready for these unexpected challenges and forcing them to tell the story out of order, I think is something we should be experimenting with.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a skill that lawyers need to have.
And I know that there's improv games that we teach, New Choice and What Comes Next. These are games that we play, and these are games that we teach. But I think as far as what we're going to be doing in our next sessions of classes, I think that's a good approach to take, is forcing the attorneys to tell the story in a way they never expected to tell it.
Kind of out of order is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, or challenging them and throwing in unexpected information, or moving the pieces around that force them to tell the story differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you want to get better at something, you practice it, and the best way to practice it is to make it into a game and make it fun, because then failure isn't that bad, right? The consequences of a trial are very high. It highly impacts someone's life. So you want to practice in an environment where it's fun, and that's the game. All right, we need a place where you might have an adventure. A place where someone might have an adventure, not like Disneyland. That's not an adventure. Adventure is dangerous. A place where there's danger.
Hiking Everest.
Hiking Everest. All right, great.
So we're going to tell a story one word at a time.
Correct, one word at a time.
We
Are
hiking
in
Mount.
Everest.
We
Are
approaching
the
summit
at
the
very
tip.
top.
Suddenly
There
is
a
Yeti.
approaching,
Us.
and
It
looks
angry.
and
It
is
angry.
suddenly
The
Yeti.
says
What
is
the
deal.
you
People We were just trying to get to the summit because we are adventurers. The Yeti says, "Ha, you puny humans! I adventure all day." Really? Say the us. Every day? Yes! I do it constantly. That would be great if we could come along. Well, I guess we could try some adventuring together. Okay. The end.
Yeah, that's an example of one-word story at a time.
Yeah. We don't know. It's a great improv game because we don't know where it's going to go, right? You cannot plan ahead. You have to be in the moment. You have to listen to what your partner says. It's one of the games we generally teach early on, like in the first or second class, because it's such a great improv game.
Yeah.
How many
In a class?
for that exercise?
Oh, well.
We do it with a group, and then we have people do it in pairs. It's a little actually more challenging to do in pairs than it is in a group. So
Yeah, I mean, you can tell one-word story at a time with 20 people.
yeah, we could all stand in a circle and do it right now. Which great. You want to try it? You want to have a try? No.
But yeah, we do all kinds of games. And for instance, if Joseph was a lawyer and we had a case together and we knew the case inside and out, we could tell that story to a jury one word at a time.
Yeah.
Because we know the story and we're in agreement about what we're going to tell. The difference in this game is we have no idea where it's going to go, but we were actively listening to each other and agreeing in that moment on what we were going to do.
And beginners, when they learn this game, will generally tell a very boring story, or they'll tell a story where they run away from any danger. So, for example, like we ran into a Yeti and interacted with it. That is kind of advanced because we're trained to avoid scary things like Yetis. But when you learn to do this, you learn that the danger is where the story is. That's where you want to go.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing in trials, is inviting the jury to watch us go into the danger. And our client is the one who's been thrust, usually not voluntarily, into dangerous situations with terrible results.
Yeah, it's accepting that and being able to face it, which is something we mostly as human beings are not